In the dim glow of a training room in Dagestan, through the haze of skipping ropes and rhythmic mitts, the Eagle, Khabib Nurmagomedov, spoke. It wasn't a stadium announcement or cinematic press conference. Instead, it was a quiet moment after drills, a whisper into a cell phone cord on the fringe of fan video. And when he uttered his first public words about Islam Makhachev's future in UFC 319, the ripple across MMA was seismic. Islam is healing, Khabib said, eyes steady, voice deliberate. Is stronger than ever. UFC 319, we'll show the world again. The pause that followed was louder than any mic drop. It wasn't bravado. It was a promise, a flicker of light in a season of uncertainty. You could feel the weight of that statement across the globe. Islam Makhachev, UFC lightweight champion, former protege turned successor, paragon of Dagestani discipline, has been unchallenged in his reign. But whispers of injury and speculation about his next fight began swirling in quiet circles. When the Eagle speaks, the MMA world listens. And here he was, breaking silence. Yet, as fans grappled with Khabib's cryptic reassurance, the conversation surged beyond Islam alone. UFC 319, the looming card with its kaleidoscope of talent, narrative crossroads, and looming financial windfalls, became a chessboard of possibilities. And Khabib, mentor, legend, and cultural touchstone, was placing pieces without revealing all of his hand. So where do things stand? What does Islam's future look like? In which fighters, narratives, and matchups will define UFC 319 and beyond? The answer begins where the spotlight doesn't always reach. Long before Islam became the UFC's greatest lightweight, long before fans knew his name, and certainly long before buzz about UFC 319 entered the ether, Khabib was building something unprecedented. Following his own retirement, he dedicated himself to grooming Islam, not just as a successor inside the cage, but as an heir to a cultural legacy outside of it. Their bond was more than coach-student. It was a brother-in-arms. Every jab, every takedown, every psychological drill carried the weight of that trust. So when Islam stepped into the octagon next, he defied expectations. After dispatching Volkanovski, the narrative was simple. The Dogefather is the new face of the lighter weight class. Energy crackled with untapped potential until it paused. The then-champ didn't stand back in the spotlight for a few months, and murmurs of injury, mental strain, and recalibration began to bubble. Enter Khabib's voice. His affirmation, Islam is healing, stronger than ever, was a grounding force. But it was also a signal that the countdown had started. And for fans, that countdown isn't just about when Islam returns. It's about what he'll build when he's back. Some insiders say the plan is already in motion. Team Islam has reportedly targeted a return fight on UFC 319's card, tentatively scheduled for early next year. Rumors suggest it's being eyed as a co-main event or headliner, depending on who else signs on. The UFC, flush with pay-per-view momentum and emerging stars, seems eager to give Islam a stage worthy of his championship aura. But the bigger question on everyone's mind is, who will he fight when he returns? Dana White, always a tease, hinted at shifting lightweight matchups in recent interviews. His tactically repositioned contenders, names like Arman Tsarukyan, Beneil Dariush, Michael Chandler, and Grant Dawson are now in the conversation for potential matchups on big cards. If Islam returns at UFC 319, facing any of them would be a statement. But Dreamland whispers of a super fight, an epic showdown that would shatter by rates and redefine lightweight for a generation. Could it be a rematch with Volkanovski? An ironclad narrative. A grudge rewritten. The only problem, Alexander now chases super middleweight gold. To lure him back to lightweight might require incentives far beyond legacy, money, location, PR magic. Then there's the possibility of a crossweight clash. Islam's style, way of the eagle, embodies relentless pressure and clinical control. Could he step up to face Charles Oliveira or Beneil Dariush? Could he sidestep weight for a powerhouse like Dustin Poirier? The business is tempting. The legacy even more so. As speculation swirled, Khabib didn't amplify or deny. He simply said Islam is stronger. A nod to purpose, silence to fuel faith. And the MMA world pushed into predictions. Inside the betting houses, odds makers are already adjusting. Islam's odds to defend successfully at UFC 319 are shrinking. A return in full force, practically a guarantee. If he fights Tsarukyan, expectation is he dominates. Against Chandler, maybe a more tempered 6-5-3-5. Versus Volkanovski, a potential toss-up. Just the idea spit sparks. Analysts pore over tapes. The combat sports press tries to forecast the narrative arc. Can Islam come back with that same IQ and hunger? Ask former champions. Has the injury slowed him or sharpened him? Others consider the mental angle. True competitors transcend physical pain with belief. Khabib's statement feels like kryptonite to doubt. Islam is healing, strengthened by challenge. UFC 319, then, staggers out of the haze of uncertainty as a powerhouse card, because Islam's return would guarantee eyes. But he may not be alone. Momentum is pairing him with explosive newcomers and re-evaluated veterans. A perfect storm for fan intrigue. Take the featherweight division, for instance. Ilia Topuria, dominant and rising. Megan Anderson seeking relevance. A new wave of challengers bouncing off talk of Islam, eager to prove themselves. UFC 319 could morph into a multi-division spectacle, with Islam's return serving as the marquee magnet. This resonates with fans across the world, purists, casuals, and mainstream spectators. The idea that the Eagles' protege returns, that he might again soar, that the division may find new storylines. This isn't business. This is emotional reclamation of purpose. The UFC knows it too. They are positioning UFC 319 as a year of the lightweight card, if they can secure Islam as a co-headliner. Their PR spin books are prepping. They are weighing location tie-ins: Vegas, London, Abu Dhabi. A global champion demands a global stage. Fans, for their part, are already crafting storylines. Some envision a Dagestan versus the World Showdown, a returning Islam in garb, eyes misted and instincts razor-sharp, against a fearless challenger. Others draft UFC 319 as a crossroads card, with Islam's return balanced by breakout calls, a young striking phenom, a grappling underdog, a returning name, and perhaps a female matchup to round it off. Social media runs wild. Islam will submit Tsarukyan in round 1. Chandler will survive, but Islam wins on cards. Nope, he fights Charles, but the champ scorecard failure ends in knockout. The predictions highlight not just interest, but investment. This is why Khabib's comment matters so profoundly. It didn't just signal Islam's health. It signaled hope. For Khabib, the highest standard. For fans, our brightest torch. For the sport, a renewal of invested storytelling. And it did so without spectacle, without hype. It was simple, quiet, powerful. As we inch closer to UFC 319, the stakes are building. Fighters, agents, gyms, they're all listening. A single confirmed bout could shift trajectories. An implied return could revive narratives. And Khabib's stoic voice sits behind it all, intangible but in command. We may not know Islam's opponent. We may not know the venue or even the card's title placement. This is why Khabib's comment matters so profoundly. It didn't just signal Islam's health. It signaled hope. For Khabib, the highest standard. For fans, our brightest torch. For the sport, a renewal of invested storytelling. And it did so without spectacle, without hype. It was simple, quiet, powerful. As we inch closer to UFC 319, the stakes are building. Fighters, agents, gyms, they're all listening. A single confirmed bout could shift trajectories. An implied return could revive narratives. And Khabib's stoic voice sits behind it all, intangible but in command. We may not know Islam's opponent. We may not know the venue or even the card's title placement. But we know something deeply human. A champion is healing. And when he does, he'll transform everything. Because in MMA, as in life, the return of the warrior who carries more than titles is the moment we circle in our hearts. The further you peer into the future horizon of the UFC, the more vibrant the landscape becomes, and the more electrifying the uncertainty. Khabib's message, that Islam is healing and stronger than ever, was more than reassurance. It was a catalyst. Like the echo of a starter pistol, every trainer, fighter, and fan shifted their gaze toward the next chapter, UFC 319. Even without confirmed bouts, conversation alone began to structure the event's blueprint. No bouts had been officially signed. No arenas had been locked. Still, whispers swirl in media circles. Las Vegas or maybe London for the site, early spring for the date. Lightweight division, emphasized. Islam's return, central. One UFC insider reportedly confided that there's informal planning for Islam to reintegrate on this card, depending on how his recovery progresses and how fast negotiations settle. If true, that's phase 1 of a broader domino effect. Fighters waiting in the wings, Arman Tsarukyan, Beneil Dariush, Mateusz Gamrot, even a rejuvenated Michael Chandler, are suddenly key figures in multiple permutations. Take Tsarukyan, relentless, youthful, well-rounded, and dangerous. In his last outing, he sounded ready for prime time, even in championship calculations. A victory there could crane him into title narrative if Islam's return stalls or pivots. Dariush carries storytelling cash. Always close, always grinding, always burdened by near-miss outcomes. A Dariush return would ignite debates about meritocracy. Chandler, though older, still packs heat, star power, and a fan following that would elevate any card. These names flicker like shooting stars in pundit conversations. Betting odds shift daily. Experts chase freshness with every data input, fight film, training camp footage, even gym Instagram reels. And everywhere, MMA threads and Reddit discussions pulse with conjecture. It's not just about who Islam might face. It's about how that matchup frames the division's future. Will his opponent be a gatekeeper meaning to test his return, or a threat meant to elevate the narrative? Meanwhile, on the undercard or parallel storylines, the featherweight division is cooking. Ilia Topuria, still ascending, is being whispered about as a possible co-main event trajectory. And title talk, not for the faint-hearted. If Islam returns, his emotion, legacy, and credentials might overshadow others in press cycles and pay-per-view. So standings whisper, maybe the UFC halves Topuria's championship spotlight to emphasize the Eagles' return narrative. But Topuria's strength, discipline, and momentum can't be ignored. His fight placement could tilt a card's meaning. Then, there's the wildcard factor, crossover intrigue. A fight like Islam versus Oliveira, or Islam versus Gaither, or even Islam stepping up to light, or as fullback, really stays the narrative. All these scenarios are being chewed over, leaving fighters and fans agitated, speculative, hungry. But amid all this, Khabib's photograph continues to loom, both literally and emotionally. His words carry weight. His gaze is legacy, and fighting systems revolve around what the Eagle endorses, warns against, or stays silent about. That's why UFC 319 isn't just a card, it's a statement. It's an opportunity for renewal, for redemption, for validation. For Islam, it's the beginning of a next chapter. For the next in line, it's either a reset shot or redirection. For the sport, it's narrative-heavy, emotional, communal. The division's fate, in some ways, hinges on it. Already, press coverage is leaning into this. Can the champion return in time for 319? Is Islam's comeback the difference between a great card and a historic one? Who benefits most from his absence? And who hangs in the balance? The substance isn't just fight. It's the overarching pulse of combat sports. Here's what we know. 1. Khabib has spoken. That alone validates curiosity. 2. Islam is healing. But timeline remains semi-clouded. 3. UFC 319 stands as a de facto placeholder for his return. 4. The narrative power is massive. So other fighters, contenders, and divisions orbit closer to prominence. Now, predictions. If Islam returns in peak form, and assuming he faces a name like Tsarukyan or Dariush, the expectation is a grappling clinic, controlled pace, decision victory, perhaps late submission. If he gets an explosive striker, Like Chandler or Poirier, the script shifts, multi-target strategy, heavier output, and even more eyeballs. Gamble on what will happen in round 3. And if he doesn't return, the card shifts into contingency plans. Perhaps a Tapuria title defense becomes the anchor, or a lightweight contender title rematch heats headlines. The branding changes, but the energy remains. Through it all, one theme stands. When Khabib speaks for Islam, the sport listens. And now that UFC 319 looms, eager for signifiers and story, Khabib has handed them one. This is where MMA breathes its richest air, at the confluence of injury, retain, ambition, legacy, and spectacle. The promise of redemption, the forecasting of youth, the certainty of uncertainty. The fight is not yet booked. The opponent is not confirmed. The city is not named. But the narrative? It's moving like wildfire. Because when a true champion is said to be healing, and his mentor's voice confirms it, the world does not wait. It leans in, heart pounding, eyes locked on that moment of return, when silence turns to thunder and headlines transform into history.